Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And I overall enjoyed this movie. However, my main problems with it is that it is a Part 1. I got through this movie, it's almost 3 hours, and there's a lot of stuff that could have been like cut or streamlined and made a very serviceable, better kind of movie that could have just been self-contained, or even a better kind of Part 1 here. It's not completely and utterly insalvageable or anything that's like completely and utterly crap. Or crap or shit. It has some execution issues that's just like, what? And I find it kind of funny that this is what kind of threw people off on like the whole AI stuff, when it does pretty much the same kind of basic things that usually are kind of done with AI in movies and any kind of like other kind of media either. I really hope that when they do the part 2, that they kind of play more into like a certain kind of angle when I actually kind of get into the story, because it does introduce an interesting kind of thing that I hope that they would actually go for it, because it'll change it up a little bit rather than like, oh god, the existential threat of AI, more along the lines of, oh, well, let's get into it. So we start at the movie and we see that there's this Russian sub, pretty much in the Bering Sea, testing off this kind of pretty much stealth tech that they've got. We see this whole thing with these keys, the whole thing locked into there. They're pretty much going off to try and like take down this US sub. However, we find out that something is fucking with its systems, and it essentially uses a torpedo and blows itself up as it then crashes down. And we see this dude float to the top with the key. The key pretty much becomes the MacGuffin thing that everybody is chasing throughout the rest of the film. Now, at first you're thinking, okay, this is something that's pretty much the Russians have made or whatnot. However, we learn that that isn't completely the case. Let's see here. So, we pretty much see that like Kittredge and the rest of the U.S. intelligence community is trying to kind of get a handle on what's going on, because there's this AI entity called the Entity that has been going around and pretty much being able to get into any kind of system no matter what. This then precipitating them eventually going back to pretty much as analog as possible with certain kind of older school satellites and everything, which I kind of really would have wanted them to actually focus on, but I mean, they've kind of bloated this thing out that they can't really focus on it. That's the kind of shit that I would have been more interested in. But we get more kind of action scenes that we see that Ilsa Faust, the disavowed MI6 agent, is pretty much has one of the keys, because evidently the ice fucking melted, and the guys that had the keys to the sub thing, the sub room that's got pretty much this stuff going on in it, that I at least believe that the Entity is pretty much locked in, that we pretty much get confirmation of down there. And they want Ethan Hunt, should he choose to accept this, to go after her, because there's bounty hunters and everything, and they want to kind of get that. We also get Kittredge pretty much talking with the director, pretty much of national security. It's like, why the hell don't I know about this impossible mission kind of shit and everything like that? It's like, because evidently it's a need to know, and you don't need to know, Dread Pirate Roberts. It's interesting that I watched the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and Elvis was in that one, and then he's in here too, and I was like, oh, this is a nice little surprise. So we have Ethan pretty much doing this thing. I do like him kind of understanding and bringing other kind of people into the organization. Well, not bringing, but he pretty much gets this information from Kittredge and welcoming them to the IMF. And then we also see him welcoming in Haley Atwell's character as we kind of get along with what's happening here. Because he helps Ilsa, he pretty much joins she joins up with them. They're trying to find the other kind of thing. The biggest kind of thing is trying to find the other key, and the only way to confirm that the keys are authentic is if you take them both together and jam them. So we've got one dude who's pretty much trying to buy the other one. So we get this whole kind of airport chase sequence that's kind of going on. This is after Ethan's pretty much gone in to try and get some more kind of information to Kittredge. As Ethan's like, yeah, I'm going to kill the entity, pretty much. As it's like manipulating cyberspace and doing all this kind of shit. It's like, okay. Kittredge was the one that placed the bounty on Elsa. Knowing he's pretty much like considered rogue, and everybody in the world's pretty much trying to gain control of this entity. That's why Ethan's pretty much off the bat rogue. We learn throughout the rest of the movie, though, that this entity was like pretty much made by national security, sent to infiltrate this up, and now it's kind of gone rogue. So it's a rogue agent, which I'm like, okay, it would really be cool if they kind of go into that and Ethan kind of changes his tactic, but he's just mainly doing the Tom Cruise stuff of running around a lot, getting chased after by these two other agents that aren't really given that much screen time, but they do question Ethan probably, especially the younger one, questioning that Ethan probably has a pretty good reason of why he's going rogue and doing all these kind of things. However, we're more interested, at least in the filmmaking process here, of making set pieces and overly long chase sequences. We do have Benji having to deal with some kind of like nuclear device, and we get a real deep callback to like the beginning of the Mission Impossible film franchise of, what was he? The thing is, I've only watched a couple of the Mission Impossibles. Gabriel. So at some point I will watch the other ones to get more of an understanding of what's kind of going on here. But we see that Gabriel is this like murderous dude that just gets instructions from the entity and we're like, I'm gonna do this shit like a motherfucker. I'm like, okay. But Benji and Luther have to deal with pretty much this nuclear football thing, but they pretty much deal with it. Ethan has to then deal with the pickpocket of Grace, who had picked the pocket, got pretty much the key and the crypto, and Ethan's like, listen, we need to do this to do the deal, linking him back up with Alana, the arms dealer. So, of course, they have to go to Venice with that. Grace is able to pretty much shake herself away from Ethan and goes like, I gotta do my kind of stuff. But the thing is, we start learning that the entity is able to do all these different kind of things. Getting into certain kind of systems, really much so in Venice, as he's trying to kind of go after and protect Elsa and Grace, because the entity is like, one of them's gonna die. Gabriel's gonna kill one of them, so you get to choose. As Gabriel's like, yep, you get to choose, Ethan. And we see that the entity is able to pretty much do deep fake kind of stuff, taking over comms, putting fake voices, mimicking voices, and everything like that. Your typical kind of AI things that they can do in certain kind of movies. But we see that Ethan gets too late and that Elsa is killed by Gabriel, but Grace is still out there. We also get this giant ass. Before this, we pretty much got this giant chase sequence. Well, we go to Rome first. That's this giant car sequence that we do this whole kind of thing with Ethan able to pretty much, he's masquerading as her lawyer. She, of course, says that he's like sexually assaulting her to pretty much get other people to get him off her back. And then they're going through this whole chase sequence with the actress who played Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy, going by the name Paris here. It's such a long chase sequence. I don't mind them escaping from the Italian authorities. Gabriel, of course, using his whole kind of thing of like what the entity can give him information-wise on this dude to pretty much try and get him to divulge information and get the key and everything. But the chase sequence is just so long, and certain CGI just pops up for no reason. It's like, come on, with this like little Fiat kind of car doing donuts around a fucking fountain and everything. I'm not adverse to a car chase sequence. That's not the issue. It just goes on for so long, and just, can we get this kind of over with? We also get that other same kind of like lengthened sequence. It's kind of like Tegrity Farms in South Park, where they kept doing the joke, and it's like, can we stop this? We already did this. Like, there's a rule, repetition, and length for certain kind of things that you have to watch out for, because we get this train sequence at the end just fucking doesn't end. Now, because they have to get there to pretty much get the keys and deal with Alana and everything like that, I'm fine with. I'm fine with the setups and the beginnings, but when I'm like sitting there and I'm like, this is 3 hours and we just got towards the end of this. I mean, we have to deal with a whole sequence where Benji's just trying to get Ethan Hunt onto the train to help Grace out, because they kind of dealt with their whole situation. Grace does decide to help him and pose as Alana to pretty much get the keys and get off the train and move forward to try and take down the entity. And I just wish that a lot of these sequences have been shortened to actually get to a better kind of stopping off point, because now we see that Kittredge is somehow, how it's kind of presented is that he's trying to buy this, giving the crypto. Grace pretty much has that kind of very intense kind of character moment of if she's going to take the crypto or not, and she doesn't, and she decides to help IMF and try and actually be a better person. Like, oh, that's kind of cool, and to trust Kittredge and everything, because Kittredge has pretty much tasked Ethan with understanding what's kind of going on. Also on this train, we see that Elwes, the Homeland, the director of like pretty much national security, pretty much gives us the info dump of the whole thing with the Sevastopol, their rogue AI agent that pretty much got stuck on the fucking thing, and it's like, I want the fuck out of this thing. It's like, yeah, that pretty much makes sense there for that thing. As we then see them dealing with this, evidently the entity has told Gabriel that Paris will betray them because Ethan had spared her life in Venice. We got that really kind of crazy-ass fight sequence that they were doing as Ethan was trying to get there, where it's this really narrow hallway, that not hallway, alleyway, that was actually pretty well done. Fight scenes were pretty good in this. I will at least give them on that. Though, when you're dealing with the CGI on the train with Ethan versus Gabriel, overall, it's decent, though the CGI kind of detracts in certain kind of instances, mainly because it's going on for so long, and you're like, can this please, can we get to our conclusion? And it didn't really make sense that Gabriel just pretty much, like, shipped himself, or the entity shipped Gabriel in there. I'm like, alright. So they pretty much make this train going runaway and everything, and Gabriel pretty much just escapes thinking, I got all the keys, but no, Grace has it. And then we get the train derailing and a bridge kind of exploding. However, Ethan and Grace are able to decouple the engine from the other passengers, and they have to crawl through this other, it's like, oh god. They crawl through a couple of trains as it's falling into the river thing, and it's just fucking like, alright, we've done this at least 3 times. Can we just please be over with this? So Ethan's got to get out. She kind of hooks up with Kittredge. The chasing dudes are just like, fuck, getting fucked over again. Paris dies. Gabriel's like, and that's pretty much where it ends. Let me see. I was gonna try and think of something else. They're thinking it's the source code to pretty much destroy it. Oh, yeah. And Elwes got killed by Gabriel. There we go. After doing his info dump, and his plot relevance is fucking useless. So, it's very kind of basic. They don't really dive too much into the meat that could really be part of this story, which I think is a lot of missed opportunities, and I hope that they delve more into it, like the understanding of the rogue AI, how it's evolved, what it's evolved into, and it essentially being like a rogue agent at this point. I hope they lean more into that, because they focus way too much on action sequences with like the chase sequence and the train that bloated this out to a point where it's like, oh god, the perfect kind of sequence that we had action-wise was the sandstorm sequence when Ethan was fighting the bounty hunters and making sure that Elsa was alive. That was actually pretty well done. It didn't overstay its welcome. It showed how Ethan and Elsa were able to tactically take advantage of the environment and the terrain and to deal with a superior numerical force. It worked out well because it's giving us character and everything. And certain jokes, it wasn't that they didn't land well enough, it's just their integration felt forced. Mainly with the whole escape sequence with Grace and Ethan as they're doing the car chase sequence with them being handcuffed together and then dealing with the Fiat, and it just was like, somebody needed a little bit better work. Again, I'm not against the jokes themselves. It's how they were executed and how they were integrated into the story. It was just like, okay. And it felt like Benji and Luther had a lot of a back seat, and a lot of the characters, because they were focusing on the globetrotting and the set pieces more than the story, which sucks. Now, they don't get to Michael Bay levels where the explosions and the set pieces are the characters and everything else is just fucking there to make sure that you see the explosions and set pieces as those characters. This, it just felt like too much emphasis was put onto there and too much focus on there rather than that they were done as the primary focus of, oh my god. So the second part, or whatever they're going to call it, or next film, is going to have a lot more kind of legwork that it's got to need to do. Hopefully it focuses more on the characters and the plot and the motivations to kind of round it out, because I think this had a lot of cool things that it could have explored, and I hope that it explores it more in the second one, because there's depth and potential. But if they don't go for it, that's kind of what happens at this point. Because there's a lot of Tom Cruise running parts. He's like running in Venice. He's running in the Abu Dhabi airport, and on top of it, I'm like, I kind of get it. You kind of understand how Ethan Hunt runs at this point. Can we just... And Tom Cruise, it's good. You could just show a little bit of it. We don't have to see him completely booking it on the top or completely booking it at certain kind of things. Like, just get us to where we need to go. And 3 hours? It's pretty much almost 3 hours. It's like 2 hours and 40 some minutes, depending upon what's kind of going on, if you do credits or not. I think that really could have been cut and hammered down to a better and kind of more manageable, at least 2 hours and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 15. I'm not going to go and completely say, like, it needs to have a certain kind of length, but there are certain... It's just bloat. You have to watch out with that. And the thing is, I think they decided that they could have that bloat because they decided to two-part this motherfucker. The whole thing with, like, an Avengers level event kind of thing, like Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, those are two parts. And I don't think that they had the kind of bloat. You kind of needed to work certain kind of things out. Are there certain kind of problems with Infinity War and Endgame? Sure. But overall, there's no kind of sequences where I'm like, okay, this lasted entirely too long and needed to be kind of like completely and utterly reconfigured. But I am looking forward to seeing where this kind of goes if Ethan decides to go more alone, especially since Ilsa was killed and he kind of sees himself as leading to all these people's deaths. He was going to kill Gabriel, but he decided not to. What that kind of happens for him, if he decides to kill the entity, if he decides to work with the entity. There are a lot of different kind of ways that this could go, depending upon what their objectives are with this story and what they kind of want to tell and do. Hopefully they focus more on the plot and the characters, because there's a lot of good stuff there. And I had an enjoyable time. I laughed at certain kind of things. I was like, okay, pretty good action sequences here. I was invested in seeing what was kind of going to go on, what the characters were going to do, how Ethan was going to react to certain situations, Benji, Luther, all that kind of stuff. It's just, this definitely goes from part one syndrome of we kind of have to pad it out to certain kind of degrees, otherwise we're going to get to the end too fast and lead us for the handoff for the next film. And that should be coming out in 2025, barring any weird things. It's scheduled on May 23rd, 2025, being delayed by the actor strike. So, we'll kind of see how this kind of goes. If you're into the spectacle and action set pieces and chase sequences, I think you'd be very well pleased with what goes on in this movie. Character and plot, it's decent enough. Again, just mainly, we have to see if we will get payoffs for it. That's the biggest kind of issue there. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend this. It's not a complete waste of time. I've watched things that were vastly worse than this. You could potentially pretty much have this on in the background because of certain sequences going on for long. So, yeah, check it out. I watched it on on-demand MGM Plus kind of thing. So, check them where you can. If you can do it physically, definitely do that. I think that would be a very nice experience, especially if you're able to do 4K and anything like that. But yeah, I would definitely, if you're into the action spy thriller kind of thing, this would definitely be a good movie for you. It's not really bloody or gory. I mean, people die and get shot and everything like that, but it's not overtly like John Wick style or anything to that kind of extent. So it's balanced well enough, PG-13 kind of stuff. So yeah, no, just take a look at the trailers. If it seems too intense for you, it's alright. But yeah, I enjoyed it and can't wait to see where we go next with the next film. So those are my opinions on the movie. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.